Conversations across time. 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 Across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across.
Welcome to Conversations Across Time, the program that allows you, the viewer, to participate and listen to imaginary conversations which happen between historical figures. Our guests tonight are former Pennsylvania State Representative Babette Josephs. Thank you, Babette, for being here. Babette is my co-host, so I'm always grateful when she's here. Next to Babette is Tsar Nicholos II. Thank you for being with us today, Tsar, and thank you for gracing us with your presence.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And seated next to the Tsar is Duchess Alexei Gudonov. And I know there was some confusion earlier because, of course, the Tsar was married to an Alexei. You are actually a Russian aristocrat who lived during the time of Tsar Nicholas's reign. So thank you for conceding to join with us. We are happy to have you here. It's interesting for us to know what the Russian royalty thought at the time of the Russian Revolution.
My pleasure.
Seated next to the Duchess is someone that I admire, and that is Premier Fidel Castro. Thank you again for consenting to join us again, and we can clear up some things that we talked about the last time.
This is my pleasure.
Now, when we broke the last time that you were here, you were mentioning the differences between how your revolution took place and Tsar Nicholas, and comparing it to what is going on now with President Obama. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I would like you to articulate that, because there are some of us who are from the left who believe that perhaps President Obama wasn't prepared to be president. But we'd like to hear from you, Premier.
What I want to clear up is the statement that I made in reference to President Barack Obama, is that when the Tsar became the monarch of his country, he was thrust into that situation, and the circumstances surrounding his monarchy were predetermined to his experience being in that chair, because the revolution, the spirit of the revolution of his people, was brought about prior to him becoming the monarch of his country. Similar to the circumstances that exist in the United States during the tenure of President then George Bush, and the state of the country being left in disrepair, and a man assuming power and given the responsibility to either take the blame or the credit for the outcome of that situation.
Which is certainly what Obama faced, certainly.
And to his disadvantage or his advantage, being the person that he was, he handled it differently because his political acumen and his political experience was different than the young man who took power in Russia at the time.
Not so
his father.
different. He didn't have so much experience.
The age difference made a big difference. The age difference was he was a very young man, and Barack Obama had been in the government, the seat of government, and the seat of leadership. He was a senator from one of his states.
From Illinois.
From Illinois.
2 years, 3 years?
2 years, 3 years, but the American system of government prepared him somewhat more in terms of his level of maturity.
You think the American system prepared him more than the system of monarchy prepared Nicholas?
I think that's true.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Absolutely.
But that's not a very
I don't think
high
we disagree
bar.
with that.
But revolution, if we talk about revolution versus elected office in America, in the United States, there's quite a total difference there, because the conditions that existed in Cuba where the people were starving, the people were being exploited by American interest. They were exporting 95% of the sugar that came to America was coming from Cuba. When the revolution was successful, a lot of that for the United States had to stop in order for Cuba to grow into its own autonomy. So that brought about the resulting blockades and the resulting economic difficulties that we were, in spite of those infractions of humanity, were able to overcome and to
But
survive.
partly you overcame it because you made an ally out of his country, closer to our time. He wasn't there anymore.
It contributes to us surviving at a different level of humanity. Let me say, a level of humanity has a lot to do with your circumstances and what you do to survive. By any means necessary, you might even say, if you have been familiar with American politics in the underclass and the underprivileged.
You're referring to Malcolm X.
Malcolm X, of course.
Yes. The interesting thing about this whole phenomenon of the underclass is that we have in Tsar Nicholas someone who just completely overlooked the underclass.
I don't say he overlooked him. I think he was unaware of the political climate and its latitude of what experience you have to rule in a situation where you are just not acclimated. His father did not prepare him for his seat of power. He was not prepared for that.
Well, that's true.
And Tsar Nicholas, as a result, you weren't prepared for it. You hear what happened, and Premier, how old were you when at the time that you took charge in Cuba?
In my 20s.
You were in your 20s, and he was in his 20s.
Yes,
Yeah,
early 20s.
I mean, you were close to the same age.
A young man. But my experiences and my passion for change and my passion for being a revolutionary was quite different, quite opposite. From ruler to revolutionary, a quite vast ocean of differences.
I don't know. I would not agree.
See,
Only in the beginning. Only in the beginning. You would appear to be on different sides of revolution, but as
we were on different sides of a bank account that we did not have as revolutionaries.
Yeah.
The monarch, the Tsar had immense wealth, immense.
I want to jump in here because one of the things that's most interesting to me when I think and study about Tsar Nicholas, the Tsar was the richest monarch in Europe. The richest monarch in Europe. And I guess the reason that I bring that up is because to me, in looking at what is going on today in the United States, we have this Grand Canyon, to borrow Larry Kasdan's movie, The Grand Canyon. We have this Grand Canyon between the have and the have-nots. And that's sort of what happened with you, Tsar. There was this gulf. And I, in my mind, can't imagine how you, at 26 years old, who had always been a Tsar, who had been raised under a father who was almost dogmatic in his notion that the dissension has to be put down, and rightfully so, because he had witnessed his father being assassinated. I get that. But you came along and seemed to have no feeling for the people of Russia. We're talking about Premier Fidel, who says, well, the people were important and the people were struggling. And I know you're a Tsar, and I realize that we were just merely commoners, but I really do wonder what you were thinking. You were watching this unravel in front of you. What were you thinking?
By having a good prime minister and other important people around him who would tell him what to do. But sometimes he could not trust everyone, and he had to appoint different people for different positions and changing them frequently.
You know what strikes me about that question? I'm thinking of the French Revolution. The royal family had no comprehension that they were going to lose their heads shortly. The British suppressing us here.
Yes.
They didn't understand that they wouldn't be able to wage a successful war across the Atlantic. We didn't understand that we would not be able to, over and over again, wage a successful war, first in Vietnam, or not first, but also in Vietnam, in Iraq. These wars are horrible for us. We didn't win them. There wasn't any winning.
Yes.
Afghanistan, what were we thinking?
The arrogance of the United States in waging wars and waging oppression around the world, and imperialism spread throughout the universe with the assumption that people can be suppressed when the passion of freedom and liberty is in their hearts and they are willing to die. People around the world are willing to die for what people here live for. So you have an imbalance there. You have the power of the people that is stronger than the will of the imperialists who want to control people.
But the people who are working on control don't seem to be thinking about the danger that they're in, even from their point of view.
They are not thinking about danger. They're thinking about materialism and gain and greed. That is the difference there. The people in
gathering more power.
The people in the revolution, people who wage revolutions against imperialism and against oppression, are fighting for their very lives. When you go into a country with an imperialist attitude to take over territories for either economic reasons or with military strength, then you are afraid and you are worried about losing lives. People lost lives in the revolution. What made it successful is that in spite of the blockades, if we go back from Eisenhower to Johnson to Kennedy to Nixon to Reagan to Carter to Clinton to Obama, and all of the restrictions that have been put on the island, a small island, to suppress it, to destroy it, have not been effective.
Not at all.
So when the question of why communism, or why would one say we are going to reach to an ally away across the ocean to support our economic and social needs, the answer is very obvious. It's an obvious choice. It's a no-brainer.
Well, we drove you. The United States drove you, in my opinion, into the arms of at the time, the USSR. It's not surprising to me. Where else were you supposed to go?
And we see this repeat itself throughout the history of the United States. We see that the United States is often in the position of being the oppressor, aligning itself with the oppressor, and consequently we have a Cuba, we have a Venezuela. I mean,
then acting surprised
when it
that
happens.
they go to,
Yes.
they go to Russia, or now
Yes.
more recently they go to China.
Yes.
And take them on as allies. Oh boy, are we surprised? What do we expect? What were we thinking?
And the reinforcement of that statement is that jobs that leave this country, that leave America and go to China, to Mexico,
Yes.
and to go to other countries where the wage is so low that the people there can have jobs and the American workers suffer, it's indicated that who wants to have a democracy if it squeezes the lifeblood out of the people who live in that country?
Now, I want to, at this point, we have to take a break. We have to take a pause for the cause, as they say. But I'd like us to come back and have a discussion about that. Because, first of all, we know that communism has not to do with governing, it has to do more with economics versus capitalism.
Absolutely.
So we should have an open and frank discussion about that. And I see the czar as representing capitalism, quite frankly. Now, perhaps I'm wrong. I'd like to be corrected on that. But when we come back from the break, we will have that discussion. Thank you so much, and we will be back in a very short time.
Conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations across time.
Are you accusing me of taking advantage?
I'm accusing you of raping her repeatedly. That's what I'm accusing you of. She had no way to say no.
Conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations.
Welcome back to Conversations Across Time. You will recall before we took our break, we were having a discussion about communism versus capitalism. I guess me as a United States citizen, I try to reconcile this because I know what I was taught in history, and I'm looking now for some explanation. So I'm going to just throw it back to you, Premier Castro. Give us some understanding of how you perceive that communism became acceptable versus capitalism, because you know there is that dichotomy we were taught, which is wrong, that communism is the opposite of democracy. Communism is an economic system. Capitalism is an economic system. Democracy has to do with government. So can you bring us home, sort of like give us some explanation as to what that means to you?
The word communism invokes fear in most people. The idea that communists are coming, the communists exist, they must be changed, they must be eradicated, does not address the problem of feeding people under a system of equitable chance for life for humanity. I think that what has happened here has been a misalignment of priorities. If my people are hungry and there are people who are referred to in the world as communists and they supply food and a way for people to survive, and that choice is made as a way of choice for people to raise their level of dignity to survive from day to day or have a system of surviving in their day-to-day lives. It does not matter what it is called, and if there are interests in the world who can supply that in the face of people who are trying to choke and starve my people, then it is a choice that makes more sense than to try and call it a democracy or to call it a capitalist system.
But in this country, in the United States, you say communist and people become completely deranged with fear. And here we can ask the Duchess, I mean, in Russia, they loved the Tsar, didn't they?
Yes,
Some
majority
people, anyway.
of, first of all, you always have to remember that Russia is huge, and nowadays we have faxes and telephones and etc. Those days they only had horses, and to carry on some of the rules and reformations or anything of such a sort, it was difficult to all parts of Russia. So obviously not everyone equally were happy with circumstances.
But
during Tsar's time.
But
commoners,
you in your class.
yes, commoners, they loved Tsar as a exemplary man because he was a good family man. He had a very good children. He raised them also in,
Скажи, что судьба моей страны для меня была более важна, чем моя судьба. Даже если меня не все любили, не все понимали, я от всего сердца хотел самое лучшее для своей страны.
Even though not everyone would love him or respect him, he always wanted more for his country, for destiny of his country, more than for his own. In other words, he would do anything that Tsar had to do.
He's not able to convince the people that shot him, his wife and his children, in 1917.
Right.
They were Russians.
Right, and they wanted to exterminate so that Tsar's family will not have any rootage in future.
There's a couple things that even though we talk about the Tsar, and he seems so benevolent in retrospect, there were certain things that troubled me. I know that I always bring up my past. I apologize to you, Babette. I apologize to the panel. But I keep looking at the things that the Tsar ignored or the Tsar did. One of the things that glares to me is his anti-Semitism. And that is that Jews were not allowed to participate in government. Jews were allowed to be doctors. I wonder why. Jews were allowed to be doctors, but they couldn't be lawyers. Now, I guess because I am a lawyer, because my co-host is a lawyer, and we think about this and say, well, wait a minute. So what you were doing was putting things in place that we could take care of your ills or we could heal you, but we couldn't run anything. I get that in his mind, he was doing what was best for Mother Russia?
Yes, he was trying to unify everybody. He was trying to Russify whole Russia because Russia has enormous amount of nationalities.
But let me ask you this.
Like us.
Even,
Yes.
like we do. But even the Christians, let's forget about the Jews. Let's put us over to the other side. The Christians who did not subscribe to Russian Orthodoxy were persecuted also. It just is amazing
God
to me.
tell them that?
And I look at it, let me just say this. I look at it as exactly how I view the right wing now. And they seem to not understand that this is a diverse culture, diverse country, and you were ruling over that. And yet at the same time, he thought he was doing what was best for Mother Russia.
Right.
But, you know, it's like the Tea Partiers today, and dare I say that, Babette?
Oh, I think so.
The Tea Partiers of today who think that they are in fact enforcing some notion that they have of Americanism that does not include us. So they make Obama an other. They make anyone who doesn't believe what they believe an other.
I think that Fidel Castro did the same thing as time went on in Cuba. I mean, people who didn't agree with you had to flee the country. That's why we have Florida full of
There are many
Cubans,
people.
right?
There are many people who will not agree with many others who are in power or who are in a capacity.
But you didn't have tolerance for them?
We have intolerance for people who are not who do not maintain the spirit.
So you're doing the best for your country. That's what we started this conversation. I said, I don't see the difference between the two of you, really.
There's the best difference. There is a great composition in Cuba of Afro-Cubans, people who are descended from Africa. We went around the world and to send troops to Algeria and to all across Angola. We supported people of color who are black, who are from the continent of Africa. So the conversion.
I want to interrupt you. So did the Romanovs. Pushkin is a perfect example of someone freed from slavery by Peter the Great, who becomes Russian royalty.
And a great poet.
And a great poet. So you freed selective people. That's my problem. I see you as selective as I see the Tsar.
No,
and correct me.
I correct you. Go.
Yes, please.
There has never been a selected group of isolated people in Cuba. We have not ever discriminated against people based on a class or race or their color, because people are so
dissenters.
Dissenters of what?
From you. People who didn't like your rule, people who didn't like the economic
There are people who don't like Barack Obama. There are people who don't like, who didn't.
Yes, and he spies on them, and that's bad.
Politically speaking.
I'm not excusing Barack Obama from anything.
But the profile of the country of the United States is no different than countries that deal with ethnic cleansing in Europe.
So your question is, what were we thinking?
Yeah, what goes on around the world, the people who do not align themselves with one another for nationalist causes based on color.
Did you do away with people who did not believe in your cause?
They have said that.
They have said it, but I'm asking you,
did you do it?
Did you do it?
Are they rotting in jail still?
They're not rotting in jails. People who are imprisoned or who are detained, who are contrary to the standards of the revolution that we deem necessary to maintain a level of humanity for the completeness of the country, probably deserve to be incarcerated.
Same thing. Same thing. And here we have our own president who's killing people remotely by drones. American citizens.
That is true, very true.
Yeah, who's spying on all of us.
But they embrace it. The American people embrace it.
Oh, wait till you see. I don't
I'm not
think
sure
so.
that they embrace
The American people will compromise human rights for a sense of security.
We used to compromise everything because we were so frightened of communism.
And yet they will go around the world to protect,
and suppress people.
Go around the world to protect people.
suppress
who
people.
don't have to
We
be
do that.
protected.
I'm not arguing that. I'm not
And
saying.
may I ask this? I'm back to the question you asked earlier. So what makes you different from the Tsar?
Oh, we are different people completely. I am different from you, Babette. I'm different from the Tsar.
Right, but
we're all
you're
di-
more like each other than
Then
I'm
we-
like you.
Yes.
Because we do what?
Because you amass power to yourself, you hold power, and you punish people who question that. Both of you.
Punishment is a response to a violation of either law that's accepted as a common way of life for people, and it is deemed necessary for those who have the option of allowing.
And we do it too.
We all do that.
We
May I
all
ask
do it.
this
That
question?
doesn't make it good or right, though.
It's,
May I say something in
Yes,
defense
please.
for Tsar Nikolai? He was not the kind of man like Hitler, or not the kind of man who was like Stalin, who would suppress people. He was never known such as. He was known as nobleman. He was known as gentle person, and he was royal. And he really tried.
May I say this to you? I just looking at it from my perspective, he was nobleman, he was royalty, he was all of these great things, and he was pussy whipped. That's the only way to describe him. Because his wife, who was a German princess, who had this idea of superiority, actually influenced him. And she and her lover Rasputin,
If they were
Well, that's
if
not
they were lovers.
that's not
That's
proven.
It's not
And-
proven. It's
yeah.
not proven. Tsar Nikolai, you know what I think about you? I believe that you may have on some level been a good and decent man, but
Yes.
you had an evil wife. And she
Now, come on,
influenced you.
don't blame the women for everything. Come on, she wasn't the Tsar. This
Well,
is like
her
the
duty
mafia.
was
Yes.
No,
to
no, but
to
The
what,
bear
mafia,
children.
the
what I'm
mafia love
thinking-
their families, right? The mafia love their
They
wives.
love their wives, but they didn't let them control
yeah,
anything.
but what I'm thinking, like, you wanted to be leader,
Yes.
like rulers, but I guess different between you and me. I was not happy to be leader. I had to do it, but
Yes.
I was more family like.
continue his family's dynasty like this.
Well,
God
I'll
told
tell
you
you,
to do it, of
let me
course.
say this. This is the
Revolutionary.
interesting that happens with conversation at time, across times. This is always happens. We end up on these dynamic conversations. We don't get an answer to anything. We have more questions.
There are
I
no
want to
answers.
say to you that I think we need to come back. I want to give you the opportunity to defend yourself on behalf of the Romanovs. I want to give Premier Castro an opportunity to defend himself. And I guess I want to be proven wrong, because I guess as me as an African American woman, I'm looking at you and saying, why in the hell did you allow this to happen? But unfortunately, we are out of town, and we have to come back, and maybe you will condescend Tsar Nikolai, you will condescend Duchess Gudonov, and you will condescend Premier Castro to come back and give us the opportunity to examine these, because I'm at the point where I don't get it. This has been Conversations Across Time. Thank you so much. We will hopefully pick up this conversation at some time in the future if these auspicious people will join us again, especially those who God tells when he can be here. If we are able to do that, we will come back and bring up this discussion and continue this discussion. Thank you very much. This is Conversations Across Time, where we ask questions, and sometimes we don't have answers, but we hope you pursue the questions. Thank you.
Conversations across time, 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 across Conversations across time.